What if the key to unlocking your husband's darkest secret wasn't in his phone, but in an app you never knew you had? For Elysia Caldwell, 7 months into a high-risk pregnancy, life was a gilded cage of comfort and luxury, all provided by her tech mogul husband, Rick. But when a strange email from Tesla Motors congratulates her on a new car purchase, a car she never bought, a single thread comes loose. Pulling on that thread unravels a web of deceit so intricate and cruel, it leads her on a digital hunt that ends not in a flashy showroom or a secret garage, but in the one place a pregnant woman fears to tread, forcing her to confront a betrayal that shatters more than just her heart. The silence in the Caldwell residence was a specific kind of quiet, the kind that costs millions of dollars to achieve. It was the sound of triple-paned glass, defeating the distant hum of San Francisco, of thick wool carpets, swallowing every footstep of a state-of-the-art HVAC system, breathing filtered air so gently it was more a feeling than a sound. For Elysia Caldwell, this silence had once been a comfort, a symbol of the secure, orderly world her husband Richard had built for them. Now it felt like the padded walls of a very luxurious asylum. At 34, Elysia was a study in suspended animation, a partner at a prestigious architectural firm before her 31st birthday. Her life was now a meticulously scheduled series of prenatal appointments, nutritionist-approved meals, and long, quiet afternoons, staring out at the Golden Gate Bridge from their Pacific Heights mansion. The pregnancy so desperately wanted, after years of trying, had been classified as high risk. The doctors used terms like placenta previa and advanced maternal age, and Rick had responded in the only way he knew how, by throwing money and control at the problem. He'd insisted she step away from work, hired a full-time chef, a personal driver, and a live-in nurse named Patricia, who monitored Elysia's blood pressure with unnerving cheerfulness. Rick was the sun around which their universe orbited. He was Richard Caldwell, the founder and CEO of Nexus Dynamics, a data analytics firm that had made him a demigod in Silicon Valley before he was 40. He was charming, relentlessly driven, and possessed a confidence so absolute it often bordered on arrogance. He saw the world as a series of problems to be solved with logic capital and force of will. Her pregnancy was no different. He'd read every book, interviewed the top perinatologists, and designed a gestational optimization protocol with the same fervor he applied to a Series C funding round. But in recent months, the sun had felt more distant, its warmth replaced by a brittle reflected light. The late nights at the office, once a staple of his ambition, had become later stretching into the small hours of the morning. When he came home, he smelled not of the city or his leather-appointed office, but of a faint, unidentifiable perfume and the cloying sweetness of expensive cocktails. He'd hold her, his hands resting on the swell of her belly, where their son, their little Nicholas, was growing. But his eyes would be distant, staring at the muted television screen across the room. "Long day, honey?" she'd ask, her voice soft. "You have no idea, Elle. Just closing a massive deal. For us. For the baby." He'd murmur the words, a well-worn shield he used to deflect any further inquiry. He was always doing it for them. The 16-hour workdays, the weekend trips to meet with investors in Singapore, the new password-protected laptop he never let out of his sight. It was all for their future, a future so bright she felt she needed sunglasses to even look at it. The initial cracks were subtle, easy to dismiss as the anxieties of a hormonal housebound pregnant woman. A credit card statement she happened to see on his desk showed a charge for $200 at a flower shop called the Crimson Petal. She loved flowers, but Rick only ever ordered orchids from one specific, ridiculously expensive florist downtown. When she'd casually asked about it, he'd waved it off. Company thing, for a secretary who retired. It was a plausible, boring explanation, yet the name stuck in her mind. The Crimson Petal. It sounded intimate romantic. Then there were the phone calls. He started taking them on the terrace, his voice a low, urgent murmur carried away by the bay breeze. She once caught a snippet as he came back inside his face, tight with an emotion she couldn't place. Not the right time, I told you. You have to be patient. Everything is handled. He saw her watching, and his face smoothed over into its usual mask of calm authority. Sorry, honey. European investors, they never sleep. Doubt is a patient poison. It started as a whisper in the back of her mind, a thought she would swat away like a fly. He's just stressed. The baby, the company. It's a lot of pressure. She was carrying his heir, the continuation of the Caldwell legacy. Of course he was protective. Of course he was working hard. To doubt him felt like a betrayal, not just of him, but of the life they had built, the very foundation on which their unborn child would stand. Her best friend, Jenna, a sharp-tongued litigator who had never been fully charmed by Rick's brand of corporate royalty, was less convinced. Men don't suddenly develop a passion for late-night, strategic planning sessions that require a change of shirt, Elle, Jenna had said over their weekly video call. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. And that perfume scent you mentioned, I bet it's not eau de circuit board. Jen, that's not fair. Elysia had replied, her defensiveness feeling thin even to her own ears. He's building an empire for us. He already has an empire, Jenna retorted. Now he's just building franchises. Be careful. Elysia had ended the call, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the fog rolling in over the bay. She chided herself for listening to Jenna's cynicism. Jenna was divorced, hardened by years of seeing the worst of people in court. Their life was different. Their love was different. It had to be. The turning point. The moment the whisper of doubt became a deafening roar arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a day like any other. Patricia, the nurse, had taken her vitals. The chef had prepared a perfect salmon and quinoa salad, and Elysia was idly scrolling through her emails on her tablet, deleting junk mail and flagging articles on nursery design. And then she saw it, an email with the subject line, "Your Tesla order confirmation and next steps." Her brow furrowed. She hadn't ordered a Tesla. They already had two Rick's black Model S, plaid a weapon of a car he drove with terrifying speed, and her own white Model X, which mostly sat gleaming in the garage, a monument to a life of mobility she no longer had. She assumed it was a sophisticated phishing scam and was about to delete it when the sender's address caught her eye. Orders tesla.com. It was legitimate. Her heart began to beat a little faster, a frantic bird against her ribs. She opened the email. Dear Elysia Caldwell, congratulations on your new Tesla. We are thrilled to begin building your custom Model Y long range. Your vehicle finished in stunning ultra red with a white premium interior and 20-tons induction wheels is scheduled to complete production within the next 2 to 4 weeks. Your order number is RN19987345. To manage your order, prepare for delivery, and access your official documents, please log in to your Tesla account. The Tesla team. Elysia read it 3 times. Elysia Caldwell, her name. Her home address was listed at the bottom of the email for billing. A Model Y. Ultra red. A car she had never seen, never configured, never even considered. A jolt cold and sharp went through her. Rick. This had to be Rick. Maybe it was a surprise, a push present, the vulgar term the internet used for gifts given to new mothers. It would be just like him, a grand, expensive gesture meant to smooth over any unspoken anxieties. But the logic of it fell apart as soon as she examined it. Why, a Model Y. It was a step down from her ex, and why keep it a secret? Rick loved the fanfare of his gifts. He would have left the brochure on her pillow accidentally, left the design studio open on his laptop. Secrecy wasn't his style. Control was. Her fingers trembled as she tapped on the link to the Tesla account login page. She used her primary email address, the one the confirmation was sent to, and clicked Forgot Password. If an account existed in her name, this would prove it. A few seconds later, a new email popped into her inbox. Password reset for your Tesla account. She felt a wave of nausea so intense she had to grip the arm of her chaise lounge. He had created an entire account in her name, using her email, her address. She followed the steps, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and dread. She set a new password, something simple she wouldn't forget, and logged in. The screen loaded, and there it was, a digital dashboard showing two vehicles linked to the Elysia Caldwell account. The first was her familiar white Model X, which she had nicknamed the Fortress, and below it, a second vehicle. An ultra-red Model Y, and right below the image of the car in clean minimalist Tesla font was the nickname the owner had given it. It wasn't Elysia's Surprise, or Baby Hauler, or anything that might suggest it was for her. The name was Cassie's Dream. The breath left Elysia's body in a ragged gasp. The room with its priceless art and panoramic views suddenly felt airless and cheap. Cassie. Who the hell was Cassie? The name was a key turning a lock in the deepest, darkest part of her mind, opening a door she never wanted to walk through. The crimson petal, the hushed phone calls, the scent of perfume. It wasn't a surprise gift. It was a secret with a name. And the most terrifying part, the feature that made her blood run cold, was displayed right there on the screen, a small icon she'd used 100 times herself to find her car in a crowded parking lot. It was the location button. With a single tap, she could see exactly where Cassie's Dream was in real time. The gilded cage had just sprung a very high-tech, very dangerous trap. And Elysia Caldwell, for the first time in a long time, felt a surge of something other than passive acceptance. It was the clear-eyed focus of an architect about to tear a flawed building down to its very foundation. The name Cassie's Dream burned on the screen of her tablet, an obscene splash of neon graffiti on the pristine white canvas of her life. Cassie. The name felt young, bubbly, and utterly foreign. Elysia repeated it under her breath. It tasted like ash. For a long moment, she just sat there, the tablet heavy in her lap, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Nicholas kicked a sudden sharp jab just below her ribs, as if he too could sense the seismic shift in their world. The silence of the house was no longer peaceful. It was predatory, filled with the ghosts of unspoken words and hidden actions. Her first instinct was to call Rick and scream, to demand to know who Cassie was, and why a $60,000 car was purchased in her name for this stranger. But the architect in her, the woman who designed structures, meant to withstand earthquakes took over. A building's integrity is only as good as its foundation. Before she could start demolition, she needed to see just how deep the rot went. An emotional outburst would only give him the chance to lie, to gallight, to twist the narrative until she was the crazy, hormonal, suspicious wife. She'd seen him do it to business rivals. He could dismantle a person's reality with a few well-chosen words. No, she would not give him that opening. She would gather data. She would build a case. Her finger hovered over the location button on the Tesla app. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the point of no return. Clicking that button was an admission that she believed him capable of the worst kind of betrayal. It was an act of profound distrust. She pressed it. A map of San Francisco bloomed on the screen, a familiar grid of streets and neighborhoods. A pulsating blue dot representing the Tesla appeared. It wasn't at a service center or a dealership. It was parked on a quiet, tree-lined street in the Marina District. An area known for its chic boutiques, trendy restaurants, and expensive modern apartment buildings favored by young professionals and socialites. She zoomed in. The blue dot was stationary right in front of a sleek glass-fronted building called the Azure. Elysia knew it. Her firm had bid on the interior design contract a few years ago. It was the epitome of new money luxury valet, parking a rooftop infinity pool and concierge service. It was not the kind of place Rick had business. His world was the financial district's steel and glass towers. The app gave her more than just a location. It gave her the car's status. Parked. Battery at 87%. Sentry mode activated. It was settled in comfortable. It belonged there. A cold fury began to solidify in her veins, displacing the hot panic. He hadn't just bought a car. He had set someone up in a life parallel to theirs. He had used her name, her identity, as a shell company for his affair. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a profound violation, a theft of her very self. For the next hour, she became a digital stalker. She watched the blue dot. It didn't move. She explored the app's other features. She could see the car's internal temperature. She could honk the horn, flash the lights. She could even unlock the doors or vent the windows. The level of control was dizzying, a perverse inversion of her own powerlessness. He had used her name to give this woman a gift, and in doing so, had handed Elysia the keys to his secret world. The irony was so bitter, it almost made her laugh. She took screenshots of everything. The order confirmation email, the account page with her name and the car's nickname, the map showing its location at the Azure. She created a new password-protected folder on her cloud drive, naming it Project Nightingale, after the famous nurse, a grimly ironic nod to her own situation. The front door clicked open downstairs. "Elle, I'm home." Rick's voice, usually a welcome sound, now sent a jolt of ice through her. She quickly closed the app, her face a carefully composed mask of neutrality. He came into the room impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit, looking energized and powerful. He dropped his briefcase by the door and came to kiss her. She had to fight every instinct to recoil from his touch. The faint scent of perfume was there again. A different one this time. Something musky and expensive. "How are my two favorite people?" he asked, placing a hand on her belly. The lie tasted like bile in her throat. "We're fine, Rick. Just resting. Long day. Brutal," he said, loosening his tie. "But we landed the Matsumoto account, worth $500 million in projected revenue." He smiled that dazzling, world-conquering smile that used to make her heart skip a beat. Now it looked predatory. It's all for you and Nicholas. A fortress of security. A fortress, like her white Tesla. A beautiful, expensive cage. That's wonderful, honey, she said, her voice smooth as glass. That night she lay beside him, in their enormous bed, feigning sleep. She listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing and felt an anger so profound it was almost elemental. He slept the sound, untroubled sleep of a man who believed he was in complete control of his universe. A man who had no idea that a few feet away his wife was wide awake, her mind racing, planning. The next morning, after he left for the office in his roaring plaid, Alicia went back to work. She opened the Tesla app. Cassie's dream was still at the Azure. An idea began to form a risky and probably foolish plan, but one she felt compelled to execute. She needed to see. She needed to know what this other life looked like. She called her driver, a quiet man named Miguel, whom Rick had hired. "Miguel, I'd like to go out for a bit," she said, trying to keep her voice casual. "Just for some air. Maybe a drive through the marina." 30 minutes later, she was in the back of their Rolls-Royce Cullinan, a car so large and imposing it felt like a private tank gliding silently through the city streets. As they neared the marina, her heart began to pound. "You can just pull over here, Miguel," she said, pointing to a spot across the street from the Azure. "I just want to sit for a moment." He shot her a concerned look in the rearview mirror, but did as he was told. From her tinted window, she had a clear view of the building's entrance. She sat there for nearly an hour, watching people come and go. Yoga moms in Lululemon tech bros, in company hoodies, elegant women with tiny dogs. Which one was Cassie? Just as she was about to give up, a flash of ultra-red caught her eye. It wasn't the car. It was a woman. She was walking out of the building, laughing into her phone. She was tall, slender, with a cascade of sun-streaked blonde hair. She was wearing a red leather jacket that almost perfectly matched the color of the Tesla in the app. She couldn't have been older than 25. She practically radiated youth and confidence. She paused at the curb, still chatting on her phone, waiting for her Uber. Alicia's breath caught in her chest. She couldn't be sure, but a sickening intuition told her this was her. This was Cassie. She was beautiful, vibrant, and unburdened. Everything Alicia in her current state of swollen, exhausted pregnancy was not. It was a cliché, the oldest one in the book, and that somehow made it hurt even more. The woman got into her car and was gone. Alicia felt strangely hollowed out. Seeing her had made it real, had given a face to the betrayal. She was no longer just a name on an app. She was a person who lived in a beautiful apartment, wore a red leather jacket, and laughed freely on the street, while Alicia sat trapped in a velvet-lined prison. On the drive home, a new resolve settled over her. This wasn't just about a cheating husband anymore. It was about the calculated, cold-blooded way he had orchestrated it. He had used her very identity, to facilitate his affair. She had to know why. And she had to know everything. That evening, she decided to set the first trap. As Rick was getting ready for bed, she casually picked up her tablet. "Oh, this is so weird," she said, feigning confusion. "I got an email from Tesla today. Something about a new car order. It must be spam, but it looks so real." She watched his face carefully. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of pure, undiluted panic crossed his eyes. It was so fast, she might have missed it if she hadn't been looking for it. But then the mask of control slammed back down. He chuckled a smooth, rehearsed sound. "Ah, Damn it. They ruined the surprise, he said, walking over and taking the tablet from her. He looked at the screen, his expression one of theatrical exasperation. Surprise? Alicia asked, her voice a perfect imitation of innocent curiosity. Yes, a surprise. For you, silly, he said, stroking her hair. A push present. I know the Model X is a bit big for just you and the baby to zip around in, so I ordered you the new Model Y. I was having it specially detailed. I told them not to send any notifications, but I guess their system is automated. The lie was so smooth, so complete, it was almost impressive. He had a contingency plan for everything. Oh, Rick, she said, allowing a flutter of delight into her voice. You didn't have to. Of course I did, he said, kissing her forehead. Only the best for my girl. She then delivered the checkmate move for this particular game. But Rick, she said, looking at the screen again, why is it nicknamed Cassie's Dream? The silence stretched for a beat too long. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes were working, computing, running through algorithms of deceit. That, he said with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes, is an old inside joke. Do you remember our trip to Catalina Island? That waitress at the cafe, the one with the crazy beehive hair, who kept calling me Chief. Her name was Cassie. We joked that her dream was to escape that island and drive off in a fancy car. I put it in as a placeholder. I was going to change it. Damn it, they spoil everything. It was a brilliant lie, specific, personal, and just self-deprecating enough to be believable. If she hadn't seen the blonde in the red jacket, if she hadn't felt the cold dread in her gut, she might have even believed him. Oh, she said, letting out a little laugh. I vaguely remember. That's funny. I'll get it all sorted out, he said, his voice dripping with magnanimity. Don't you worry your pretty little head about it. Just focus on staying healthy and growing our boy. He took the tablet and closed the app. He thought he had contained the breach. He thought he had patched the vulnerability in his system. He had no idea she had already changed the password. He had no idea she still had the key. And he had no idea that her investigation had only just begun. The blue dot on the map was her digital leash, and she was about to follow it all the way down the rabbit hole. The lie about Cassie the waitress settled over their home like a toxic chemical leak, invisible, but suffocating. Believing he had masterfully diffused the situation, Rick launched a campaign of attentive devotion. It was a gaslighting Grand Prix, with him as the smiling champion, and Alicia as the silent captive audience. He brought her flowers, praised her resilience, and spoke endlessly of the future he was building for their family. Every loving gesture felt like a lie, every promise a carefully crafted piece of fiction. Alicia played her part with the chilling precision of a stage actress. She was the grateful, placid wife, but beneath the calm surface, she was a predator gathering intelligence. Every moment Rick was gone, she was on her tablet, the Tesla app, her unblinking eye. Cassie's dream became her obsession. She didn't need to follow it. She just needed to watch and learn its patterns. The patterns told a damning story. 2 or 3 evenings a week, the car would travel from its home at the Azure in the marina to expensive romantic restaurants Rick had never taken her to. On those nights, he would invariably call her around 7:00 p.m. Hey, honey. His voice would be a mask of weary professionalism. This board meeting is dragging on forever. We're ordering in pizza. Wish I was there with you. Alicia, staring at the blue dot of the red Tesla parked outside a Michelin-starred Italian restaurant in North Beach, would reply, her voice as smooth as cream. Oh, you poor thing. Don't work too hard. We miss you. One Thursday, the car traveled south to the Rosewood Sand Hill Hotel, a known hub for Silicon Valley's elite and their discreet rendezvous. Rick's call came at 8:15 p.m. Unbelievable, he sighed. A deal in Tokyo is blowing up. I have to drive down to the Palo Alto office for a late-night call. Don't wait up. She knew his own car was sitting in their garage. He was lying about where he was, what he was doing, and how he was getting there. The duplicity was a constant heavy weight. In a hushed call with her friend Jenna, she confessed the waitress' lie. Jenna was apoplectic. Elle, he's a psychopath. That's not just a lie, it's a screenplay. You have to leave and go where Elysia countered, her voice cold and pragmatic. If I confront him now, he'll say I'm a hormonal, paranoid, pregnant woman. He controls every asset, every account. His lawyers would paint me as an unstable gold digger, and I'd walk away with nothing. He would crush me before I even reached the courthouse steps. I won't give him that satisfaction. So what's the plan? I need something more than location data. Elysia stated a new hard resolve in her voice. I need proof that is undeniable and absolute. I need to find the money. This decision led her to the one person who could navigate the labyrinth of her husband's finances, her brother David. A forensic accountant for the Department of Justice, David was a bloodhound for financial fraud, who had always viewed Rick's slick charisma with suspicion. Swallowing her pride, Elysia laid out the entire story from the initial email to the web of lies. David listened without interruption, his silence more damning than any outburst. Let me get this straight, he said, finally his voice grim. The tech genius who preaches transparency is running a classic shell game. Okay, Elle. A man like Rick isn't paying for this on a credit card he shares with you. He's created a separate financial entity, an LLC, a shell corporation. It's the only way to hide this level of expenditure. To find it, I need access to his main computer, the one in his office. The request sent a bolt of fear through her. Rick's office was a fortress. I can't, David. It's locked, and his password is impossible. Nothing's impossible for a man that arrogant, David retorted. He has a system. You just have to figure out what it is. That night, Elysia waited until the sound of Rick's steady breathing filled the bedroom. She slipped out of bed, her heart pounding a deafening rhythm in the silent house. She went to his office door. She remembered his arrogance, his belief that no one would dare challenge his authority. Her fingers trembled as she reached up to the top of the doorframe. They brushed against the cold, hard metal of a spare key. The lock clicked open with terrifying ease. Inside the office was dark, dominated by the huge black screen of his iMac. She sat in his throne-like leather chair and woke the machine. A single field glowed in the darkness, demanding a password. She thought of David's words and of a long-ago conversation with Rick about his system for memory. His passwords weren't random. They were formulas. What was most important to him? His company, the source of his power and identity. What was its origin story, the day it was founded? And what was his self-image? A titan of industry. Taking a shaky breath, she began to type. Nexus founding. Titan. The screen shimmered and dissolved, revealing his desktop. A wave of triumphant relief washed over her. She had breached the gates. She immediately initiated a video call with David. I'm in, she whispered. Good girl, he said, his face a determined mask on her phone screen. Now let's go hunting. For the next 2 hours, with David as her guide, Elysia delved into the digital soul of her husband. It was a chilling excavation. They finally found what they were looking for, hidden inside a folder innocuously labeled Archived Tax Audits. Within it was a subfolder that made her blood run cold. It was named Project Nightingale, the exact same name she had used for her own secret folder of evidence. "He's either a step ahead of you or you two are just creepily in sync," David muttered. Inside was the entire infrastructure of his betrayal. There were incorporation documents for a Nevada LLC, Nightingale Holdings. There were bank statements from a boutique firm in Wyoming showing an initial wire transfer of $500,000 from one of Rick's secondary investment funds labeled Initial Capitalization. This was followed by automated monthly transfers of $25,000 disguised as management fees. They found a signed lease agreement for the apartment at the Azure with Nightingale Holdings LLC as the tenant. They found statements for a corporate black card issued under the LLC, with the authorized user listed as Cassandra Monroe. The charges were a litany of luxury Chanel Cartier 5-star weekends in Napa. He hadn't just cheated. He had created a corporation to be his mistress's benefactor, funding a second life with $500,000 of their marital assets. "My God, David," Elysia breathed, scrolling through the lavish expenses. "This isn't an affair. It's a privately funded subsidiary." "He didn't just get a Mistress L," David said grimly. "He acquired a lifestyle brand and made you the unwilling angel investor." As she dug deeper, her eyes landed on a PDF buried in a subfolder of receipts. It wasn't from a hotel or a designer boutique. The letterhead read, "The Sterling Fertility Group." It was a detailed invoice for a battery of expensive procedures, comprehensive chromosomal screening, and pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. The cost was $18,000. It had been paid in full 3 months prior by Nightingale Holdings LLC. The air left Elysia's lungs. The neat, orderly evidence of financial fraud dissolved into a chaotic, terrifying new reality. Fertility clinics, genetic testing. This wasn't just about hiding money or funding a lavish affair. A new poisonous possibility began to bloom in her mind, so horrific she had refused to even consider it until now. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she turned back to her tablet, fumbling to open the Tesla app one more time. She had to know where Cassie's dream was right now at this very moment. She stabbed at the location icon. The map loaded. The blue dot appeared pulsating with a silent, malevolent energy. It was no longer at the Azure. It was not at a restaurant or a hotel. It was parked in the private lot of the St. Jude's Medical Center. And the pin was dropped directly over the wing, labeled Westwood Maternity Pavilion. The room started to spin. An invoice from a fertility clinic, followed by a real-time location tracker. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening snap. Elysia's fingers trembling, refreshed the Tesla app. The blue dot representing Cassie's dream was not at a boutique or a restaurant. It was stationary in the private parking garage of the St. Jude's Medical Center, specifically at the new hyper-exclusive Westwood Maternity Pavilion. The blood drained from her face. It was a possibility so monstrous, so profoundly cruel, that her mind had refused to form the thought. Now the thought was a reality, pulsating on a map. Forgetting the doctor's orders and Rick's suffocating restrictions, Elysia grabbed the keys to her own white Tesla Model X. She hadn't driven in months, but as her hands gripped the cool steering wheel, she felt a flicker of her old self return. She wasn't a fragile patient. She was a woman driving toward a terrible truth. As she navigated the city, Her phone synced to the car, lit up with a text from Rick. "Hey, honey, where are you going? Is everything okay?" The digital leash worked both ways. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Her reply was swift a lie, typed with cold precision. "Craving a pastry from a little bakery downtown. We'll be back soon. Feeling fine." The Westwood Maternity Pavilion looked less like a hospital and more like a 5-star wellness retreat, all glass and warm cedar. It was the best, and Rick had already booked the premier suite for Elysia's own delivery. As she walked through the lavender-scented lobby, her eyes fell upon a large bronze donor plaque. At the very top, in gleaming letters, were the words, "The Caldwell Family Wing." He hadn't just booked a room. He had bought the entire wing. The audacity of it stole her breath. "Good afternoon. How may I help you?" the concierge asked with a polished smile. "I'm here to see my husband, Richard Caldwell." Elysia said the lie, tasting like acid. "He's meeting with the administration, and I wanted to surprise him." "Of course, Mrs. Caldwell. A pleasure to see you." The woman beamed. "He's actually on the 3rd floor, our premium suite level. The elevators are just to your left." The short elevator ride felt like an eternity. When the doors opened onto a hushed, opulent corridor, Elysia's heart hammered against her ribs. She walked slowly, her hand resting on her own swollen belly, a protective gesture that now felt like an act of mourning. Then she heard it, a man's voice, low and familiar, and a woman's light laughter, drifting from a slightly ajar door. Suite 305. Flattening herself against the wall opposite, she peered through the narrow opening. The scene inside was the portrait of domestic bliss. Rick was leaning over a hospital bed, his expression tender. And in that bed, propped against a mountain of pillows and wearing a silk pajama set, was Cassie. Her pregnancy was unmistakable, a perfect round curve beneath the silk. She was glowing. "The doctor said everything looks perfect." Rick murmured, his voice the same gentle tone he always used with Elysia. "Our little girl is strong. A true Monroe." Our little girl. The word struck Elysia with the force of a physical blow. A daughter. All his talk of a male heir, of continuing the Caldwell legacy with their son Nicholas, was a lie. Cassie laughed. "A Monroe? I thought she was a Caldwell." "She is," he said softly. "But she has your fire. The house in Marin is almost ready. The staff is hired. Everything is set up for you." A house in Marin. A staff. This wasn't a fling. It was a fully funded parallel life. But the final, most exquisite act of cruelty was yet to come. "I had the designers send over the final mock-ups for the nursery," Rick said, picking up a tablet. "I want you to look." He angled the screen toward Cassie, and through the crack in the door, Elysia saw it. A 3D architectural rendering of a beautiful light-filled nursery. Whimsical animal murals. A custom-built crib. It was perfect. And it was almost identical to the design Elysia had poured her heart into for Nicholas's room over the last month. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had stolen her vision, plagiarized the intimate details of her motherhood, and duplicated them for his other family. It was a violation so profound, it hollowed her out, a theft not of money or fidelity, but of her very soul. A choked, strangled sob escaped her throat. It was a tiny sound, but in the tomb-like silence of the hallway, it felt like a scream. Inside the room, the voices stopped. "What was that?" Cassie asked, her voice suddenly sharp. "Probably just a nurse," Rick answered, ever dismissive. Elysia knew she had only seconds. She could not be found here, a hysterical, weeping wife in the hallway. That would be his victory. With a surge of adrenaline, she pushed herself from the wall and walked her movements stiff and robotic toward the elevators. She pressed the button, her eyes fixed on the polished steel doors, refusing to look back. She heard the suite door open behind her. "Hello," Rick's voice echoed down the corridor. "Is someone there?" The elevator chimed and the doors slid open. Elysia stepped inside. As they began to close, she saw his reflection. He was standing in the middle of the hall, a king surveying his domain, confused by a tremor he could not identify. He hadn't seen her. She rode down in silence, walked through the serene lobby and out into the cold concrete of the parking garage. Inside her car, she gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. The tears did not come. The time for grief had passed, burned away in the heat of his ultimate betrayal. A cold, terrifyingly clear purpose began to form in the wreckage of her heart. An architect knows that when a building's foundation is rotten, you don't renovate. You bring in a wrecking ball. And Elysia Caldwell, her hand resting on the belly that carried his son, decided then and there she was going to be the one to swing it. The drive from St. Jude's was a study in glacial calm. The shock had burned away every tear, leaving behind a diamond-hard clarity. Elysia didn't go home. She drove to a noisy cafe, where she was just another face in the crowd, and called her brother David. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "He's having another baby," she said, her voice a flat, emotionless wire. "The mistress is pregnant. I saw them in the maternity wing he funded with our money. He's building them a house and copied my nursery design for their daughter." A heavy silence met her from Washington, D.C. When David finally spoke, his voice was tight with controlled rage. "Elle, I'm on the next flight. Listen to me. What you have is devastating, but to truly dismantle him, to go after the company, we need to prove Nightingale Holdings was more than a slush fund. We need to tie it directly to Nexus Dynamics. We have to get into the encrypted vault on his computer." "I know," Elysia said, a terrifying resolve settling in her. "He'll be home soon. I'll handle him. And tonight, I'm getting you that key." Returning to the Pacific Heights mansion felt like a general returning to an occupied city. She walked in with a newfound purpose that radiated from her. Rick, who had been pacing like a caged animal, rushed toward her, his face a storm of feigned concern and real anger. "Elysia, where have you been? I was about to call the police. The doctors said you shouldn't be driving." She turned on him, her eyes flashing with a calculated fire she knew he would misinterpret. "I'm pregnant, Rick, not a prisoner," she snapped, letting her voice tremble with manufactured hormonal rage. "I'm sick of being treated like a porcelain doll. In this museum you call a home I needed to breathe." It worked perfectly. His anger dissolved, replaced by the condescending calm of a man handling an irrational creature. "Okay, honey. Okay," he said, trying to embrace her. She recoiled, a genuine flinch that she let him see. "I'm just tired," she said, turning away. "I want to sleep." He watched her go. His brow furrowed, but he had filed her behavior under pregnant and emotional. He believed he was still in control. He had no idea his kingdom was hours from falling. That night with David waiting in a rental car, blocks away, Elysia slipped into the silent office. The familiar iMac password, Nexus Founding, for 10201 and 2. Titan got her into the system. But as David had warned, a second authentication wall blocked the encrypted archives. She had to guess the password to the vault. Her mind raced. His future, his legacy. She tried the obvious. Nicholas Caldwell, CEO, 2050. Access denied. Caldwell, Legacy, 2050. Access denied. Frustration mounted with each failed attempt. She was missing his core motivation. She closed her eyes, picturing him in that hospital room, talking about his daughter, his true Monroe. His ego wasn't singular. It was multifaceted. His vision of a dynasty wasn't just about his legitimate son. It was about the entire secret empire he was building. The password wouldn't be about one child. It would be the grand, secret name of his whole project. It would encompass both heirs. Nicholas Caldwell. Serena Monroe. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing out the full, arrogant scope of his ambition. NCSM, Nexus Dynasty. 50. The computer chimed. The vault was open. "I'm in, David," she whispered into her phone, her voice shaking with triumph. "I'm all the way in." For the next 2 hours with David guiding her, Alicia unearthed the totality of the fraud. It was worse than they imagined. Nightingale Holdings wasn't just a vehicle for an affair. It was a criminal enterprise. Rick was having Nexus Dynamics pay the shell company millions in fake consulting fees, effectively stealing from his own investors to fund his second life. They found Project Nightingale, Phase 2, a detailed plan to award Cassandra Monroe millions in stock options, giving his mistress a substantial stake in the company. But the final document, buried in a folder labeled Nexus Tax Strategy, was the kill shot. It was a memo outlining a sophisticated tax avoidance scheme built around the creation of trusts for both his children, the legitimate one, and the secret one. It was a detailed, step-by-step plan to defraud the IRS of tens of millions of dollars, a conspiracy documented in his own words. "We've got him," David breathed over the phone. "This isn't a messy divorce, Elle. This is federal wire fraud and tax evasion. This is prison." As dawn approached, Alicia copied the last file onto an encrypted thumb drive. She left the office locking the door on her old life and slipped back into bed next to the man who slept the sound sleep of a king oblivious to the fact that his reign was over. The next morning, Alicia met with Harriet Doyle, a divorce lawyer with a reputation for dismantling titans. Alicia didn't present herself as a wronged wife. She came as a prosecutor with an airtight case. She and David laid out the evidence, the app, the financials, the stock plan, and the tax memo. Harriet listened intently, her expression growing colder and sharper with each exhibit. When they finished, she leaned back, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "Mrs. Caldwell," the lawyer said, her voice like chipping ice, "most clients come to me seeking a settlement. What you have brought me is the leverage for an unconditional surrender. We will not just file for divorce. We will orchestrate a multi-front assault. I will handle the personal assets. Your brother will deliver his whistleblower reports to the SEC and the IRS. Mr. Caldwell will not know what hit him." Alicia nodded, the last vestiges of the victim. She had been burned away. She was no longer a piece in his game. She was the strategist, the architect of his downfall. She went home to her gilded cage one last time, not as a prisoner, but as a warden, counting down the final hours of a death row inmate. The quiet of the house no longer felt like a prison. It was the calm before her storm. The end came not with a screaming match, but with the cold, quiet efficiency of a corporate takeover. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, Rick Caldwell was in a Nexus Dynamics board meeting, presenting a rosy picture of third-quarter growth, when his world imploded. Simultaneously, a team of IRS agents walked into the company's finance department. An SEC subpoena landed on the general counsel's desk, and Harriet Doyle's courier hand-delivered divorce papers to him in the boardroom. The papers didn't just ask for a divorce. They included a single devastating attachment, the memo on tax fraud titled SM Nexus Dynasty 50. Rick's public downfall was brutal and swift. The board, faced with federal investigations and irrefutable proof of his fraud, ousted him immediately. News of the scandal tanked the company's stock. His name, once a symbol of innovation, became synonymous with deceit. Cassie Monroe, exposed as the beneficiary of corporate fraud, saw her influencer career evaporate overnight, and was last heard of lawyering up her dream turned into a legal nightmare. Elysia never spoke to Rick again. Through her lawyer, she orchestrated the terms of his surrender. She didn't take half. She took a controlling interest. She forced him to sign over a majority of his now decimated shares in Nexus Dynamics and the Pacific Heights mansion. With David's guidance, she initiated a complete corporate restructuring, installed a new board, and began the long process of rebuilding the company her husband had nearly destroyed. 3 weeks after the implosion, Elysia gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. She delivered him not in the tainted Caldwell wing at St. Jude's, but in a different hospital under her own name, Elysia Vance, her maiden name, which she had legally restored. She named her son Nicholas Vance. His legacy would be his own. Months later, sitting in the sun-drenched living room of her mansion, holding her son Elysia, looked out at the bay. She was no longer a prisoner in a gilded cage. She was the architect of her own life, a life built not on lies, but on a foundation of unbreakable strength. The Tesla app. The digital leash that had started it all was long deleted. She didn't need to track anyone anymore. She knew exactly where she was going. What an absolutely insane story of betrayal and revenge. Elysia's journey from a trapped wife to a strategic powerhouse is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest strength is found in the deepest pain. It shows how technology meant to control and deceive can become the very tool of liberation. What do you think, was Elysia's revenge justified? Could she have handled it differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. This story took a lot of research and effort to bring to you, so if you were on the edge of your seat, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. And if you want more gripping true-life dramas and tales of deception, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.